B Cube Sunday morning. We have with us David Gerrold and Jim Wright. All of us, I think, are on the road somewhere. Um, and I'm up at Rainforest
I'm in the
Rider
Congo.
Village. Yeah. He's at, what are you at?
I'm in the Congo. No,
Oh, Congo.
I'm in Middleville, Michigan, and I'm sitting at a coffee shop in the middle of a tiny little town in the middle of cornfields is where I'm at the moment with surprisingly good internet. So
Hey, but
hey,
everything you've said makes me think that coffee shop in Middlevale is just
yeah,
one rocket away.
Middleville. Yeah, it's a very nice place, very nice people, great coffee, and so it's not Left Field Cafe, I think is the name of the place, and so I was very happy to find it because I've got about 10 gigs of bird pictures that need to be uploaded to to deep storage, and the bandwidth that I have out on the farm is not that. So,
Well, hey, I understand that. And well, B Cube Sunday morning, we're here, and I am just thrilled to have two of my favorite authors um, with us,
who are
Jim and
those?
David,
Who are
of
those guys?
course.
Where are those guys?
Yeah, when are they showing up?
So when are they showing up? I'm
Oh,
excited. Who are they?
come on! I, as you told me last time when I asked you when the sequel to Hell is going to be out, you said when I finish it.
That's
Are we
right.
any
That's
closer?
David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with Hella too is I realized I'd made a mistake in the structure of the book and the planet. Forgot about the scorch belt across the equator, and so I have to rip out the whole middle section and rewrite it. And I just haven't had the heart to get back into it yet. I will, probably sometime in
That's.
the next couple of weeks.
I think
I
it
just
would take
finished
me about.
a sequel. I just
Well,
finished a
keep
sequel to
going.
Ganny Knits a Spaceship called Ganny Goes to War. So 45,000 words. I sent that off to Analog, and I hope they love it.
If
I'm
they
It's
sure they
about
don't,
how
will.
you fight. It's about how you fight a war from the asteroid belt to Mars to Earth, etc. It's about the economics of such a war as well as the mechanics of it. And it turns
oh
out
yeah.
it's also an allegory for some of the crap we're going through right now. I didn't intend it, but it just happened.
Speaking of the crap we're going through right now, tell me about it.
All right, let me kick this off. We are not dealing with democracies or tyrannies. We are dealing with corporate feudalism. Is that the corporations have become so big, they're bigger than the governments of countries, and the amount of money they can invest affecting how a government works, pressure on elections, etc. We have corporate feudalism. Okay, Jim, it's yours.
Thanks. No, I could have said it better myself. And you're literally seeing these sort of things right now, especially with. You take a look at what's happening with, of course, the big train explosion here, and people are bitching that the Secretary of Transportation is not there. People are hollering that the company is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, or whatever the hell we think it's supposed to be doing. We're complaining that the people that were in charge have relaxed regulations and all that kind of fun stuff. But I think the bigger picture is what you're talking about, which is the fact that all of these things happen because these corporations have tremendous amount of power, tremendous amount of money, and determine how the laws and regulations are actually implemented or not implemented. And that's exactly what we're looking at here.
The history of this is interesting. It was during the Obama administration that the railroads admitted that they could put in better safety and needed to. They even admitted they needed to and wanted to. And so the Obama administration put in some serious regulations for train safety. And those regulations were repealed under Trump. The corporate bullies said, yeah, we don't need those regulations, right? And this
Right.
is the inevitable result. And it's not Buttigieg's fault. He inherited a mess, and you can only do so much if you're one person. He got caught by this. Everybody got caught by this.
Right, but this is, I mean, this is a
safety regulations. We're going to get back those safety regulations, but even more strict than before now.
right. Well, but again, you're seeing, this is simply another facet of a bigger problem, and that problem, pops up all the way. If it's not a train crash, it's an oil spill. If it's not that, it's an explosion of a gas pipeline. It's it's aircraft that crashed because they weren't properly maintained because regulations were relaxed. It's the fact that, like in this case, you had union guys that were saying, "Listen, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. It's unsafe. We don't feel safe operating the trains, and we're going to go on strike." And the current administration, and again, people kill me because when I criticize Democrats, people get mad about it. And if your principles depend on your politics, you don't have any principles. And while Trump should certainly be held accountable for getting rid of breaking regulations or changing those regulations, I also hold the current administration accountable for not listening to the folks that were telling them this is a dangerous situation. We need to do something. And the current administration said, we don't want to hear it. We already have economic issues. If you guys go on strike, that will increase the economic problems. We're in the middle of recovery. We don't want to hear it. Keep rolling. And this kind of thing happened. And so while I absolutely agree with what you said, I also think that it's important that, again, you're seeing this across the board. It's not just the railroad. It just happens to be the railroad this week. The week before, it was a pipeline that exploded. The week before that, it was, every once in a while you turn around and one of these natural gas lines blow up a whole neighborhood. You see this stuff. I mean, this stuff goes back to, you can trace this stuff directly back to things like the Space Shuttle Challenger when it blew up, when engineers told them, listen, if you launch this son of a bitch, it's going to explode. And people said, listen, there's a lot of money involved here, and it'll probably be okay. Let's just go anyway. After that was over, after the Challenger crashed and we did the big investigation, and they said, well, geez, it should have been obvious. I actually, I was a student of Edwin Tufte, the statistician, the guy's very famous for doing the Challenger explosion analysis. And so when that guy laid it all out on the table and did his analysis, it's very obvious. I mean, if you launch this thing, it'll blow up, 100% possibility. There's no way around it. And yet, when we went ahead, the bean counters made the decision. The people that were not engineers, the people that didn't have access to the information, said, "Listen, we're not going to listen to the professionals." And in this case, we're not going to listen to people that actually operate the trains.
That's what happened with Boeing and the 737 MAX. The bean counters took over the company. When a company was run by engineers, you got the 747, which was one of the safest and best airplanes in the world. They're still flying. But I'll tell you this, in Japan, they run these super fast trains, 200, 300 miles per hour, and they've never had an accident because they are scrupulous about maintenance and scrupulous about the integrity of the machines. And so you get on a Japanese train and you're going to get where you're going. You are not going to end up in a twisted pile of metal somewhere between Tokyo and Hiroshima. You're going to get where you're going.
But they also tend to hold people responsible. In fact, people hold themselves responsible in Japan. If they screw up, there's a long tradition of doing yourself in if you let down the public. And right. And and
China,
I don't know if that's the answer either. But and I don't know.
China was exporting dog food. China was exporting dog food to America, and it turned out that they were putting something in the dog food. Dogs were dying, and so that whole batch of dog food, that whole company was held accountable, and the vice president in the government, not just the guy to commit suicide. He committed suicide or he was executed because the damage done to the Chinese economy. It's like there's a warning there. Don't screw around with our economy.
Right. But, again, and like I said, I don't know that that's, I'm not necessarily advocating that, these people do themselves in, but the thing is that there has to be some sort of medium between not holding people accountable. And like I said, if you even go back to the Challenger disaster, I mean, this is a very public major disaster that was specifically caused because the people that made the decisions didn't listen to the people that actually knew what they were talking about. They ignored the experts, and people died. We lost $1 billion machine. 7 people died in that explosion. It was very public. It happened on TV, and no one was ever held accountable for that. Nobody went to jail. It's the same thing later on when Columbia re-entered and burned up, and they knew that the ship had been damaged, and somebody made a decision and said, "Nah, it'll be fine. Don't tell them about it." And 7 more people died. And again, no one was ever held accountable. Nobody went to jail over those decisions. And that's a metaphor for what we see what we're seeing with this train disaster right now, what we see with oil spills. Occasionally somebody goes to jail, but it's never the guy that made the decision. It's always some scapegoat. It's always some guy that they found to take a rap, and they send him off to jail for a while, and everybody goes right back to making money. And we keep, and this is a metaphor for gun violence. It's a metaphor for environmental disaster. It's an environmental, because in this country, the only thing that really matters is profit. And everything else is secondary to making a buck. And this is true of everything from healthcare to railroads to spaceships in this country. And somewhere along the line, we got this idea that the only thing that really matters to Americans is money, and this measure of wealth and profit. And you literally see people in Congress. And the thing about it, the ones that holler about this the loudest are the ones that claim to be constitutionalist. So, well, the Constitution was designed to protect people, not corporations, not profits. And yet, everybody 90% of the people that we elect to represent us, the people, and I don't know how many times I see "we the people." I just had one this morning on Twitter. We the people. That's who Congress is supposed to be representing. And yet, when you hear them talk, what they actually represent is profit. And that's our biggest problem in this country. This goes right back to how you led off here, corporate feudalism. The Lord of the Manor has the money, and he's the guy that's most important. And the rest of us are goddamn peasants. And if the train explodes in your backyard, too bad for you. Trump will come along and give you some 13-year-old water to drink. Have a nice day. And
let me interject a thought here. This comes back to a long-range plan from the right wing of, and it would have happened even if it wasn't a long-range plan. It would have happened because corporations discovered back in the 50s and 60s that they could buy other companies. And the best example of this is Disney, which now owns 20th and Lucasfilm and Marvel.
They're a monster.
It's like, you can't have a childhood unless Disney approves. But in the realm of publishing, back in the 60s, there were 300 distributors. So if you had an independent, if you were a small publishing company, you had 300 opportunities to distribute your book. Now, obviously, you wanted to go with one of the big ones, but now there are only 3 distributors. And if you can't get one of those 3 distributors to get your books into the bookstore, you're screwed. Except we now have Amazon and independent and self-publishing and et cetera, so that there are other ways for an independent publisher to make money. But the fact is, the goal of the combining all of the distributors into one was a greater control over what was getting on newsstands, what was getting into the bookstores. And that happened. And so the result is that where used to be publishing was a real market, where you could, peddle a book to a publisher, and if that one didn't take it, you go to the next. And the mainstream publishers were a serious market. Not anymore. It's very difficult for any writer, even the established writers, to get into it's like they can sit on a manuscript for a year and finally decide, it doesn't work for us. Right. They can make demands that nobody would have dared ask years and years ago. So
and part of the problem with that is in what you see, and you can see I think the unintended consequences of that in that you start to see a uniformity, kind of a bland uniformity to right, because we know that this Marvel movie sold, and so every movie that comes out is one way or another, it's that model. It's these guys in tights and capes, and I'm like, and I saw this the other day where I saw again another goddamn Batman reboot. I'm like, listen, do you know how many goddamn books, how many books there are in the science fiction genre? I mean, stories, books. There are millions of these things, and we keep making fucking Spider-Man.
Let me tell you,
Middle of a coffee shop here, but we keep making Spider-Man reboots. For God's sake, man!
Jim, listen to this. Okay, so back in the '60s, you could go into the science fiction section of any bookstore, and here was everybody from Asimov to Zelazny, and it was all novels and collections, right?
I don't want to mention that back then there was also a guy named Gerrold too, which would make him too really old now.
Yeah, very old. Anyway, but then
jackass.
Then you had franchising, and it started with Star Trek and Star Wars, and you would walk into the bookstores, and where you previously saw whole racks of science fiction, now you saw whole racks of Star Wars and Star Trek, and all the Asimovs and Zelazny's and everybody in between. There was a lot less space for their books. Now you go into a bookstore. And it's not just Star Wars and Star Trek and all of the other franchises. It's the game franchises and spin-offs as well.
Right.
And so it's very hard, even if you could get a book in print, it's very hard to get it on the shelf, let alone on an end cap. The end caps are all the franchises. And this...
and again, look, there's nothing wrong. I mean, I like, I enjoy those franchises as much as anybody else. We go to convention. We were at the World Science Fiction Conventions. Every other person's dressed up in a Star Trek uniform, or they're a Klingon, or they're carrying a lightsaber around. And those things are great. Don't get me wrong, but they definitely are squeezing out the things that you're talking about. And again, there are these. Not only are there many classics from the genre that date back. I mean, there are incredible books from the 50s and 60s that I would love to see turned into really good movies or really good franchises. But there's also, don't get me wrong, because I think this was a problem with the George R.R. Martin's speech at Worldcon here a couple of years back, where he went on and on about books written by old white guys in the 60s. There's a hell of a lot of people writing really great stuff right now, and none of that stuff is getting turned into movies. None of it's getting turned into series. I see that a lot of times. I see that it's optioned. Hollywood came along and they bought it, and then it wound up on a shelf somewhere. And I saw that Nora Jemisin got picked up for some. I guess they're going to turn some of her stuff into a series, and that's awesome because it finally here's something that's fantastic from today, from an author that's working right now, that's going to get turned into something, hopefully. And but again, all I see, every time I turn around, it's another. Oh, look, this year's Star Trek reboot, this year's Star Wars reboot. And don't get me wrong, again, I'm as big a dork as the rest of you people, and I enjoy that stuff. But in fact, the latest Star Wars reboot, Andor, is probably the goddamn series that it should have been 20 years ago, because that's what I wanted to see all this time. But again, I see all this really great stuff today that is good. On the other hand, we're sitting on a micropress blog, or whatever the hell this is, video podcast. I must be old. I don't know what the words are anymore. But we're sitting on a micropress video broadcast, and this provides opportunities that we never had before. Yeah.
Let me give you this. Free speech is like a handful of mud. You squeeze it, it's going to come out somewhere between your fingers. And during the Soviet Union, there was Samizdat, Samizdat, which was private publishing, and people would distribute their little fanzines or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And they would take used X-ray things and turn them into records you could play.
Right.
That was how they
those little press. Yeah.
The internet and what we're talking about, this here, BQ Press and the streaming and whatever, this is our version of Samizdat. This is our free speech.
Yeah.
This is where we are. This is what we're creating because we cannot get into the mainstream, the so-called mainstream anymore. We're creating a new mainstream that is outside and is working. This is where the real free speech occurs. And
Right.
if they ever figure out how to control it, we'll invent something new.
Right. And that's the thing, and so I really enjoy this opportunity, to do these kind of things and to publish stories that, that a big publisher just simply couldn't take time. I think they simply can't. They can't take that risk. The editor can't take that. He's going to buy stuff that he or she's going to buy things that they know will sell books and that will. And so, like I said, you wind up with kind of this bland, sameless and mainstream publishing. What's funny about that is that if you read Larry Niven's science fiction from the 70s, when he was exploring universal instantaneous teleportation, where anybody could step into a booth like a phone booth, put in a quarter and go anywhere in the world anytime they wanted to. That was one of the things that he had predicted, was that culture kind of disappeared. If he mentions it in Louis Wu in the beginning of Ringworld, it says birthday. He's 250 years old, and he's 200 years old, and he's teleporting around the world ahead of the dawn to make his birthday last an extra day. And what he's complaining about is that he's bored because Tokyo looks like Brazil, looks like New York, looks like Los Angeles, looks like Moscow. It's all the same because teleportation.
We're already there. We're already there.
Right, except we didn't get teleportation, but we got the internet. Right.
Yeah,
right.
But you're driving cross country, so you're seeing the same phenomenon. Is every off ramp has a McDonald's and a Starbucks and a Denny's, right?
Coffee.
And
right, exactly. And if it's Indiana,
yeah,
it's the World
off the
Palace
internet
and a Baptist church.
Right, but you get off you hit the state roads, and all of a sudden you're seeing the small towns. And on my last trip,
Right.
because I was on the state roads, it was like I didn't see a McDonald's for 2 days, and I was actually starting to freak out. It's like, and you don't see a Motel 6. You don't see a Motel 6. You don't see. It's all of a sudden you're seeing these towns too small to have franchises, but they have the independent and the locals, and they're doing really well. And
that's
not all of them. There were a couple small towns I drove through that were totally, completely empty.
Right, and what you're talking about is how every Stephen King story starts. I'm just saying,
It depends on whether I have to be someplace in a hurry, whether I'm on the interstate or not.
Right. So, that's in my case. I for those of you who don't know, and I think most of you do, I'm actually in Michigan. I'm sitting in a dinky little coffee shop in the middle of a tiny little town in the middle of cornfields, and that's the only place that I could get any bandwidth. But we had a family medical issue, and so I've been driving back and forth, and I've been doing exactly what David's talking. I've now driven 65, Highway 65, from end to end 4 times in the last month and a half, and so there's this sameness to the United States. Every exit is the same for, it's a Subway, a McDonald's, a Starbucks, and then, like I said, if you're driving through Indiana, on one side is the world's largest porn emporium, and on the other side is the world's largest Baptist church. Yay, Mike Pence land. And but again, these are things that science fiction predicted 40 years ago. And except when Niven wrote about it, it was teleportation. In reality, teleportation became the internet, which basically allows us to do the same thing in virtual reality all over the world. And you're starting to see this blending of cultures. And I don't know that it's a bad thing. I don't know that it's a good thing. It's simply something that's happening. On the other hand, like David said, with publishing, we're seeing kind of this bland sameness because the same 3 corporations control the narrative, and they're profit-driven machines. And I don't know if there's anything wrong with that, because you don't publish books for charity. You publish books to make money, and the authors write stuff to make a living. And the problem with that is that it's risk adverse. You generally are not publishing things that you don't know if they'll sell. You are, and you see this with Twitter. Twitter, the platform is currently in this free fall of disaster. It's like it's astounding the destruction of Twitter at the moment. And the one thing I say
don't know
is
why
somebody
Twitter sold it. So I don't know. The guys at Twitter decided.
Well,
to
and
sell
that was it.
themselves
We'll see
to
that.
Elon Musk.
We'll see that. But But that's where I'm
It
going
was
with
a
this.
strategic exit. I would say,
Well,
I would
and again,
suggest
but
they knew that there was no place to go, and let's cash
right.
out.
And that may, and that's and that's exactly it. Again, we're very profit driven here. Um, there was no way that Elon Musk wasn't going to do exactly what Elon Musk is doing right now. Elon Musk has entered the terminal stage of Howard Hughesdom. Eventually we're going to find this guy locked in a movie theater with jars of his own piss and 4-inch fingernails, and I mean, that's just where we're going here. I mean, you can see it, and they're going to find this guy living on Mars in a capsule, surrounded by tanks of his own urine, and the thing about it though is that anybody and everybody did predict that this is exactly what would happen. And and people say, I didn't know it'd be this bad. Really? Because I did. But hang on a second. The thing is that, and I asked about this, and I spoke to people that were on the board and investors that were investors in Twitter. And I said, why in the name of God would you do this? And the answer is the board of directors, the people who made this decision, their duty is not to you and me or the billions of people who use their platform. Their duty is strictly to the shareholder. And $44 billion takeover bid was profit for the shareholders. And it doesn't matter what happens after that. And that takes us right back around to where we started with what you originally talked about. Again, this disaster that happened in the middle of the country with exploding trains, this is the same exact mindset. Our duty is to the shareholder and to the profit, and not to the people who live in the small towns in the middle of the country. Oh, well, somebody else will take care of them.
Let me give you a for instance, or a specific. Back in the end of the 40s, the early 50s, Ian and Betty Valentine invented the paperback book. Donald A. Walhall over at Ace invented the double novel. And this was very good for writers. Now, I had sold 2 or 3 novels to Betty Valentine, her collection, and she said, I'm not going to make any money off your collection, with a finger in my eye. I'm not going to make any money, but I'm going to buy it so that you'll stay loyal, and I will get your next book, which will be a bestseller. And my next 2 books for her were The World of Star Trek and The Making of the Trouble with Tribbles, both of which were such incredible bestsellers that Betty once admitted, she said, boy, I wish we had done the pictures in color and charged an extra quarter. We made it.
I have originals of both of those books.
Yeah, Betty said those books made enough money. They paid for the house I'm living in right now, the house that we're going to sell shortly. Really, I have to say, in those days, publishers had a relationship with writers of, I want you in my stable, and I will publish even your stinker if it's going to get me your, and she did that when Bob Silverberg had a fire at his house, lost his house. She sent him $2,000, which was big money in those days, and said, here's an advance on your next book for me. And when Ted Sturgeon hit a writer's block, she said to him, here's some files I have from the psychiatrist. Is there a novel in here? And he wrote Some of Your Blood for her. And so Betty Valentine's relationship with the writers she supported and you got was Valentine Books was the first place book. Every writer wanted to break into Valentine. And what happened was when she turned it over to Judy Lynn and Lester Del Rey, Judy Lynn and Lester, I love them both. They're great people, did great work, but they didn't have that same relationship with supporting writers, and a few writers drifted away to other publishers. Now, Don Walheim over at Ace, and I get this direct from Betsy, who was there, his daughter. She tells some great stories about how Don Walheim, he couldn't afford to pay the same advances, but he was out there pushing the books for a lot of writers, C.J. Cherry and Chip Delaney, and John Brunner, and a lot of other writers knew they could depend on Ace Books, doubles. And in those days, you had editors who cared about taking care of the writers. Not so anymore. Writers are disposable in Hollywood, and that might affected every other industry that needs writers. And now that we have ChatGPT, people say we don't need writers at all. We'll have the machine do it for us. It's like You look at what ChatGPT turns out, and it's like I could write a better outline than that. It's hollow. It lacks substance. It's just it's crap. The only place where I find ChatGPT. Wait a minute, let me finish this. The only place I find it interesting is it writes good blurbs and it writes good code. It writes good programming code.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, though, it's funny you should bring that, because that's where I was going with this was AI chat and Chat GP. And one of the and of course, now what you're seeing, I saw Clark's World had to shut down subscriptions this month because they were getting 500-600 Chat GP submissions each day. They couldn't sort through it to find stuff that was actually written by a human being. But you know what's interesting to me? Have you ever read any of that stuff that's produced? Have you read like any short stories or speeches that are produced by Chat GP? If you read it, it sounds, you read it and it sounds like it's a story. But if you actually go as a writer or an editor and you try to break it down, it's nonsensical. It doesn't mean anything. You know what that reminds me of? I think Chat GP. No, I think Chat GP is writing Donald Trump speeches. Because if you go through and you compare what he says to what ChatGPT produces, it's the same. It sounds like he's saying something, but if you break that down, it's the same. It's that bit out of Asimov's Foundation, where the representative of the emperor comes out to the foundation and they record his speech. And then when they actually take out all the nonsensical words and the stuff that doesn't mean anything, there's nothing left. The guy's promises mean absolutely shit. And that's what that reminds me of. That if you look at ChatGPT and you look at Donald Trump's speeches, they're the same bullshit, man.
It's the abnegation of critical thinking. There has been a war on critical thinking since the 50s with the fanatics trying to, it's like you can't, and Orwell pointed it out in 1984. He says, if you can control the language, you get rid of these words, you can control people's ability to think. And all of those who are practicing all kinds of cancel culture things, all kinds of ways of, you can't have this book, the book banners, essentially they want to destroy our ability to have critical thinking, so we will accept what they tell us. And of course, that's why writers are the enemy, because we don't accept it. We're all creating new worlds, new ways, and we're dangerous people, which is exactly who we want to be. Harlan created danger. Thank you. Created Dangerous Visions as a way of saying, let's challenge cultural defaults. Let's challenge them. And you go back, you reread Dangerous Visions. Not all of them were all that dangerous, not by our standards today. Yeah. Paul Anderson's story is a big yawn, but which is a shame. He's a great writer. But
yeah, he's fantastic. Yeah.
But then you read things like with the Big Thin Boomer Boys on Little Old New Alabama, and that still knocks you down on the floor. Right. And the big space. I can't say it because we're trying to watch our language around here, but really the job of the writer, Harlan understood this. The job of the writer is to be dangerous, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Right. That's exactly it. And it's like I don't know, every time you talk about being dangerous. I mean, what's your phrase there? But 90% of what you do is plotting revenge,
I said that. We went out to dinner with a bunch of people, including Jerry Pornell, and I don't remember what was. I said, well, 90% of what I do is research, and the other 10% is planning revenge. And he nearly fell out of his chair because a writer understands that, and a writer understands what we're writing. Most of what we write is stories of revenge.
Right. But again, you're seeing all this stuff. One of the things that, of course, is my current social media feed, Twitter here, and I'm working from a laptop, and so I don't have my usual display of screen, so I can look at topics as we're sitting here talking.
Me too.
But the last 2 days, my Twitter feed has been full of people, both pro and anti, hollering about Dilbert being canceled, and To which my original response was, "They're still running that comic strip, okay." But and then I see Scott Adams. He replied to something I said, and and he's bitching and complaining about cancel culture and how he's how he's being canceled, yada yada yada. The usual predictable bullshit that every white old middle-aged racist complains about when they get called out on their bullshit. And I just thought it was kind of funny, like you said, on one hand, we have like the state of Florida where I live, we are literally suppressing writers and books and ideas. Those people are legitimately being canceled by an autocratic governor this guy's about 5 minutes from Sieg Island and, goose stepping down the goddamn middle of the road. Then in the meantime, some privileged dipshit who writes a has-been comic strip and made millions of dollars doing it is bitching and complaining because people don't want to listen to his racist bullshit. There's
he discovered the hard way. He discovered the hard way that freedom of speech is not freedom. Yeah. It is not freedom from consequences. You can say anything you want. You can print anything you want. But other people have the equal right to respond and take action. And the newspapers that were publishing his comic strips said, if we continue like an endorsement of a position that we do not want to be associated with. So he not learned, I need to write a book called How to Be Famous, which essentially is you got to manage your PR. Just because you're famous, just because you're rich, does not mean your opinions are valid. And anytime you attack any class of people, you make that class of people your enemy. And if you attack enough people, you make a lot of enemies. Now you can punch, don't punch down, punch up. But if you could, I could say terrible things about, say, Donald Trump or Kanye West, and you would all go, yeah, okay. But if I said something terrible about a whole class of people, regardless of what that class was, you would justifiably say that David Gerrold is a racist or a sexist or a whatever, because I would have lumped a whole bunch of people and turn them to objects instead of regarding them as and people are not objects. Terry Pratchett said the biggest sin in the world is treating people as objects.
Right. And again, there's a class of humor. Right. There's a class of mean humor in this country that has been traditionally acceptable, and over the last couple of years no longer is. And that's a good thing. That means society is evolving. That means that we're maybe becoming better people. And of course, whenever those kind of cultural changes happen, there are always people that resist that, and you're seeing that now. You see primarily. I'm in the process of getting an essay that's about half done that you guys will see here the next day or two when I get done with it. But the question is, you have to ask yourself, what would you do if you were happy? Because most Americans are miserable, but you ask them, so why are you miserable? Most Americans have enough to eat and a place to live, and it may not be spectacular. And I am not saying don't start writing stuff in the comments. I'm not saying that everybody does, but compared to the rest of the world, most Americans are in pretty good, at least are not like a lot of places, and yet they're the most miserable goddamn people in the world. And why is that? And you're miserable.
Advertising.
Well.
Our television interrupts us
a huge amount of
every 10 minutes. It tells us every 10 minutes to tell us we stink, to tell us we smell bad, to tell us you're not going to be happy until you have this. And there's no escape from advertising. You go prowling on the internet and say, oh, here's an interesting news item, and you go to click on the news item, and there's this thing that pops up. Wouldn't you to subscribe? No, I want to read your content. I don't want to subscribe. And if I like what I read, I'll come back. And
that's the thing, though. But
you can't escape it.
Right. There's a huge amount of money to be made in this country by telling people that they're miserable. In fact, there's an entire news channel that made billions of dollars doing it, and so much so that other news channels all kind of adopted that model to various extents. And it used to be, an official news guy with a tie and Walter Cronkite type voice would get on and read you the news at night and tell you what's happening in the world, and he would do that without commentary. And tell you what's had. It's just a fax. This is the news, and then the guy would get off. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's how it used to be. But somewhere along the line, it became this narrative, and now there isn't a single news channel or program in the United States that's not half a dozen chattering ninnies every morning sitting around a table chattering about what they think is important and why you should be miserable about it. And, and I see that all over the place. People that are just absolutely angry in this country all the time. And I'm like, well, what the hell are you angry? You're driving a $70,000 SUV. You're living in a McMansion. You're drinking $8 coffees. The fuck do you got to complain about? But they are.
Yeah,
and they're madder than hell about it. And
over here,
I
was going to say, over here, I got an indoor plumbing. I got hot running water. I got heat. I got a fridge full of food. By me, that's right or heaven. It's not right or heaven for anybody else. But it's right or heaven. Leave me alone. And I have the internet to do research if I need to know the exact. It's like, what does this word mean? What's the I can look it up and go back to writing. It's like. Because I have the perfect writing machine in front of me, so I am in writer heaven. This is not heaven for anybody else. It's like, I'm miserable. Why are you miserable? I don't know. I'm miserable. Stop watching the news.
Right. Well, and like I said, there's a hell of a lot.
Cross country, when I'm driving cross country, I have the news turned off because the local stations are crazy, and so I just play music and I come home relaxed. I've had 2 weeks, a week to the convention, a week at the convention, a week drive. I come home relaxed. It's like, what has happened? Oh, New York was nuked. Oh, that was 2 weeks ago. I don't have to care anymore.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like I said, when I used to drive cross country to stay awake, I'd when I drove through a lot of, because the portions of the country that I typically drive through are very rural. And so the only thing that was on was either religion, which is all anger and angst and misery and horror and repentance and, fire and brimstone, because that's what people listen to, or Rush Limbaugh. That was the only two things that you really, if you were driving through rural Georgia, your choices were Rush Limbaugh 24 hours a day or the local, Church of Misery. And there wasn't anything else.
But, two things about that. Rush Limbaugh, the local stations were hungry for original programming. And the whole Rush Limbaugh thing is, we're going to offer you 3 hours of Rush Limbaugh, and you don't have to pay anything for it. And we will sell the ad time. And so the local stations said, oh, that's great. The Fox News did the same thing with putting in the television sets in the various restaurants, as long as you leave it tuned to Fox News, right? And so it was a deliberate campaign to put in those right-wing thinking everywhere at the expense of critical thinking. So,
and you see it now.
One of the things now is for religion. Now it's for wait. Let me give you the other half of this. This is a famous story. Guy talks to a pastor and says, "I want you to deliver these 2 sermons, one this week and next week, and what happens to your collection plate each week." Well, the first week was a sermon on love, and the second week was a sermon on fire and brimstone and who to hate. Guess which one filled the collection plate? So hate and blame and fire and brimstone is much more profitable. Remember what we're talking earlier about profit for the share? Well, churches think in terms of income too.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So
it's
the
a
whole
business.
is a business.
Sure, which is one of the reasons that you periodically, about once a week, see me say online and social media to great consternation that churches should be taxed like everybody else in this country. But again, though, the same thing that you're talking about is the same stuff that you see every day on Tucker Carlson. The guy cracks me up because, if you watch it, the stuff that guy complains about, some of it is mainstream stuff. But a lot of it is just the most ridiculous, goddamn nonsensical complaints that you've ever seen in your life. And it doesn't matter, because the people that watch that, they don't remember 10 minutes later what the hell he was talking about. All they know is that they're being put upon, they're victims, and they're mad. That's, and it's those people's fault. And it's funny. I went back and looked at Ted Cruz. And he's a guy that I follow pretty closely because he's really the center of the narrative on the far right, and I'm waving to the left as I do that, because I'm left-handed. But I look at what Cruz said, and I've got his tweets written down here. I copy all of this stuff. But a year ago, Ted Cruz was demanding that Joe Biden send support for freedom in Ukraine. We've got to support Ukraine. We've got to stand up to Russia. We've got to send them tanks. We've got to send them airplanes. We've got to send them money. We've got to send fighters. We got to go. And now it's a year later, and that narrative has shifted 360 degrees to Russia's the victim. And I can't believe that we're sending our money over to this corrupt country and yada. And literally not a single person that votes for that guy can see that 360 degree change of rudder. Can't see it. It doesn't matter what the hell that guy's complaining about today.
Apparently, Russia has bought the Republican Party. I mean,
well, sure.
Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Trader Green and that whole pack of liars is like their speeches are being written in Russia. It's like, we knew Russian money helped elect Trump. It's like, Putin hasn't been up on fixing our next election for us.
Well, and it's the thing.
If he survives that.
The worst part about this is what you say is 99% probably true. But then again, maybe the Russians aren't buying our election, but there's no way to tell. Because with the current laws in place for black money and dark money going into our elections and into super PACs, you can't prove it one way or the other. Nobody in America knows who's funding our elections. Nobody. You can't tell. Left, right, foreign countries. Could be Russia, could be Israel, could be China, could be Georgia, could be Alabama. You have no way to tell who's buying your politicians, who's paying for your elections. You don't know who paid for that campaign sign out front. And the law in America won't let you know. One of the worst possible things that happened to this country with Citizens United, more than anything else in this country, to get us back on track, that goddamn law needs to be repealed. And Americans says, you can't, the foundation of a representative of a democratic republic like the United States, the very foundation of that is educated voters who elect the people who will represent us in government. And there is no way that you can do that duty responsibly as a citizen without that information. You have no idea who is behind these narratives, who's paying for this stuff, who's even paying for the campaign signs in your front yard. You can't possibly be a responsible citizen without knowing who's funding those campaigns. And yet, of course, now with the Supreme Court that we currently have, there's absolutely no chance that those laws will be repealed. And again, these are the very things that both you and I wrote about 5 years ago. We said, listen, I know you don't like the choices. I don't like the choices. Still, those are the choices. And if you don't show the hell up, Donald Trump is going to be deciding what the laws are in this country because he's going to decide who sits on the Supreme Court. And here we are, I hear very happy noises I don't know if it's happy noises. It's very much mom noises in the background of your house there. No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
The kitchen. They're cleaning the kitchen behind me. So
right.
You're probably hearing. You're probably hearing Aiden, who is. He's a very happy kid.
He's the most popular part of this podcast, man. Right.
Sean and Elise are two incredible parents, and I'm very proud of them. So,
well, I will say that to probably both of our chagrins, Aiden is generally the most popular part of this podcast. So,
well, there's a little stress going on here. We have a lot of stuff that we have to take care of today, and I've got somebody, as soon as this broadcast is over, I have a guy coming over to fix the desktop machine, which went down, which is like, so that was a week of not getting some serious work done. There's stuff I could do on the laptop, but it's like, oh crap. So
Yeah,
we know what
I
the
have a horrible
problem is.
time writing on. I've got, I don't know how many, have a dozen short stories. I owe things to you. I owe things to Bob. I owe things to 2 or 3 other publishers, and I cannot write on a laptop. I can't. My hands are damaged, and I have to have my big keyboard in my office, and I just can't do it, man. And hey, I see some comments. I'm watching the comments scroll down the side of the screen. I think somebody asked, what do you think will happen first? Citizens United repealed, or will we end up in Civil War II? I don't know. This is the problem, and this is the problem. And to take us full circle with how David started us out, one of the problems with corporate feudalism is it becomes very, very difficult to predict the future in anything other than apocalyptic terms. In a stable, functioning democracy, the future is predictable. And that's how it should be. Good government, stable civilization should be boring. It shouldn't be one crisis after another. And I don't mean that there won't always be crisis, but I mean that if there's a disaster, a natural disaster or man-made disaster, you should predictably be able to expect that the people in charge will step in and will deal with that in a predictable fashion. Everybody will get taken care of and society will move on. The problem with the world that we live in now is it's one manufactured horrible crisis after another. It's impossible to predict what will happen. This was the biggest problem with the Trump presidency. Is it? Wow, there's some kind of weird noise happening here.
Oh, it's a vacuum cleaner in the background. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. One of the biggest problems with the Trump presidency is that you never knew what that crazy bastard was going to do from one day to the next. And for a guy that spent all of his time talking about the stock market, that kind of unpredictability at the top is the worst possible thing that you can have happen for steady corporate growth in the stock market, start at Wall Street, because investments are based on the idea that we will have a stable civilization that will grow at a relatively predictable rate, and that most people will act in a rational and reasonable fashion. And that is exactly the opposite of what the previous administration operated at. I see a lot of people, and this is one of the things that I see on social media, where everything is just manufactured drama. We're saying, well, boring, Biden isn't boring. He's just like this old boring guy. He doesn't do it. Yeah, no shit. That's what you want in your government. You don't want a guy that gets up in the morning and suddenly decides to stick horse dewormer up his ass or light bulbs down his throat or whatever the hell that clown was going to do from one day to the next. Government civilization should move in a predictable fashion. And even if there's a crisis, you should be able to anticipate with a reasonable degree of certainty what the people in charge are going to do. And that's how civilizations remain stable in the long term, and we all benefit from this. Of course, that kind of boring predictability doesn't sell newspapers, doesn't sell stories, doesn't sell advertising revenue on Fox News. What sells it is crisis and unpredictability.
The thing in newspapers and television follow a very simple rule: if it bleeds, it leads.
It leads.
People
That's
want to
exactly
hear the
right.
bad news first.
All right.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, and they live for crises that they can go to 24-hour coverage. It's like, something blows up, train gets derailed. Oh, good. Now we get 24-hour news coverage. Everybody's going to tune in, and we can go to commercials and make a money.
And that's absolutely true. And again, we're right back to where we started with this, with the cast here an hour ago, which is that it's all based on profit in this country. And if we don't have a crisis, then we manufacture one, because that's what sells advertising revenue. That's what sells books. That's what sells, my God, every politician. I just see Ted Cruz hawking his book. Not like Ted Cruz actually wrote a fucking book. I mean, come on, this guy can barely read. But he's got a book, and that book is nothing. And I tell you, I download these things and I read them, and I realize I'm giving these people money. But on the other hand, you people tune into me and you read what I write because you expect me to be the guy that does this kind of intelligence work. And so I read through these books, and they are all the same. I mean, they could all be written by the same chat GP AI engine.
They are.
And it is.
These books are turned out by think tanks. There are right-wing think tanks that determine what can we sell to get our way.
And if you read them, if you sit down and you read Ted Cruz's book, Rand Paul's latest book, and the latest, the last Rush Limbaugh's latest Screed and Glenn Beck, all of these things they're the same. They're the same thing. There's just a litany of grievances of everything is wrong and how they're victims and they're put upon and everything is bad. And it is. And it's the same stuff that you see reflected in your media. And it's the thing that you see on social media every day. And one of the reasons, and I get this, I get hate mail. I could read you my hate mail. I'll refrain from doing that. But the hate mail I've been getting lately is you've published too many pictures and you're not telling us about the terrible things that are happening in the world. And I'm like, listen, there are 5,000 channels of terrible things. I'm showing you some of the beauty that I see through the camera lens. And people literally look at that and they say, yeah, those are fine. The pictures are fine, but I don't tune into you to see good, beautiful pictures of birds. I tune into you to see the horror and the misery and the terrible things that are happening in the world. And that makes me really think about the kind of message that I'm putting out, and makes me want to publish nothing but pictures of kittens every day, because I don't want to be that guy. And that's a funny thing is I look at the channels that grow, that are huge, that have millions and millions and millions of followers, and they are a litany of horror and disaster or porn, one or the other. And I don't think I want to be either one of those.
We saw this. Yeah. We saw this in the science fiction community in 2015. There was this attempt to disrupt the World Science Fiction Convention, the Hugo Awards. You were there.
Oh yeah, yeah. You and I were right in the middle of it.
Yeah. But if you go and I looked at their websites for a couple of days, and book pages and their blogs, and it was all who to hate. It was as you said, it was their grievances. It's like, we didn't get our fair share. So you didn't get your share. Nobody does. The universe isn't fair. It never was. The universe is just this machine that chugs along doing what it does. Your job is to do what you can to make it better. And being a disruptor does not make things better. So,
well, it was funny because I was there with you.
Yeah, it's hard work being a builder.
It was funny. It was funny, I think, because you and I were together at that convention, and boy, goddamn, when you said they're looking for someone to hate, well, they found someone to hate because they hated you, and it was funny because and again, and I mentioned this to you, and I think I may have mentioned it to a few people that are watching, but if you've ever been to I realize that probably 90% of you that watch my channel, you're not science fiction fans. And most of the ones that watch David, of course, you guys are primarily sci-fi fans. But if you've never been to a World Science Fiction Convention, even if you're not a sci-fi fan, you should go at least once in your life, because Worldcon is fantastic. Chicago this year was a blast.
It was so much fun.
And the thing about it is, you go to a World Science Fiction Convention, and there's 20,000 people from all over the planet, and they're all a bunch of dorks and weirdos, and the two of us here, right, are right in the middle of it, and they're dressed up like Klingons and Star Trek people and dinosaurs and monsters, and they're all different people from all over the place, all races, all colors, all beliefs, all these people, and every one. The thing about 99% of these people is they don't give a shit who you are. They don't care if you're a famous writer. They don't care if you're a fan. They don't care if you're dressed up like Star Trek. Now they may care about which version of Star Trek you like. Those are very heated conversations. But the thing about it is that if a talking squid from Zeta Reticuli showed up, they'd welcome him in, show him around, and we'd all go out to coffee together. It's a place where everybody is just who the hell they are, and nobody gives a shit, and you don't have to worry about what other people think. And everybody has a blast. And then what David was talking about, we were in Spokane, and there was this small subset of these very angry, miserable sons of bitches who spent. Now, Worldcon tickets are not cheap. And then, of course, you got to pay for the hotel. And Worldcon can cost you a little bit of money to go to. And these are people that invested significant money to spend a week being miserable. How the hell is that possible? How can you go to Worldcon and have a terrible time because there's people there that you don't like? I have no idea. And this is, again, a metaphor for much larger things, because most Americans are in compared to the many other places, compared to being bombed by Russia and Ukraine, are in pretty decent place. And yet they're just miserable sons of bitches because they're invested in being angry and miserable and looking at the absolute worst in everything. And then nothing infuriates them more than there are other people having a good time. And even though that good time doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form, by God, they're just furious that those people should be out there enjoying their lives. Those dorks dressed up like Star Trek Klingons, or people that love people that they don't like, or that they're just miserable about it. And there's an entire
let me share a story with you. Oprah Winfrey.
These are my favorite. This is my favorite part, is when you share stories. Yeah.
Okay, Oprah Winfrey shared a thing that there was a woman she despised and hated and despised for years. And she was at some party or some event, and she saw this woman over at the other side of the room having a great time, chatting with friends, just laughing. And she realized that her years of hatred had no effect on this other person who she had hated so much. Her hatred was all internal. And it goes back to this thing that supposedly Buddha said, but everybody else has been credited with it too. Resentment is like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die.
Right.
And that's really, exactly it. Really is what so many of it's like. I'm off here having a good time, and I find out every so often that somebody over there hates me. It's like, okay, fine. It's not going to affect my good time.
Well, it's funny. I don't know if you saw it, because you don't watch Twitter all that much, but I got what did somebody say? You'll love this one. You'll love this one. I got people saw this. I think it was 2 days ago on my Twitter feed. I got up in the morning and I got there was a message on my Twitter feed that said, "You are a bitter fag." That's what it said. And so my response to that was, "I am not bitter." And, the thing about it is, it kills me that there are these people that are they're just, and that's the insult the guy uses. I mean, that's the insult this guy uses. Like, he's 14, and this guy he's probably my age. He's in his 60s, and I'm like, for the love of God, man, you literally sit and you look at social media and you look for things to make you mad, and then you send these angry little one-liners, and this is your life. This is what you do with your day. If I look at your social media feed, it is just thousands of these same messages, and this is who you are. You're sitting at home, seething about people that have no effect on your life in any way, shape, or form. And I don't know. It kills me. So I said, I am not bitter, and so that made him mad. And again, America, and I don't know how we get back from this, because you have so many people telling you. I'll tell you how we get back from it,
but you're not going to like it. All right. October of 1929, everything crashed.
Yeah, that's true.
And it took 3 years of the Great Depression for people to say, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And so if the Republican Nazi Party gets their way, everything's going to crash, and they will be held accountable. And it doesn't matter how thoroughly they own the courts or the election system.
Right.
It turns out, you don't need violent revolution. You only need about, 10% of the people, 20% of the people hit the street test, and the government comes down. We've seen this over and over in 30 or 40 different places all around the world in the past 50 years. And the people hit the streets, the government. The best part is the best example is the end of the Soviet Union. The people hit the streets and said, "We do not accept this coup." And the result was the end of the Soviet Union. And there were no shots fired.
Right.
So,
and that's what I'm hoping happens here. Again, and my latest essay, that's one of the things I said at the end of my latest essay. Like, violence at this point is probably inevitable, but we can limit that violence. And again, at every moment in history, we can change course. The future is not set. It's not, it's not the Terminator, the future's not set. We can change course. We have the examples of the past, which is one of the reasons these people don't want us learning about the past. This is why people like Ron DeSantis want to ban history in schools, because they don't want you to know that. But when you look at like the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy, and you say, how did these people not see this coming? Well, the thing is, people did see it coming. They wrote about it. There were tens of millions of words about they saw it coming. But it becomes like this inevitable thing that the horrible people keep getting in charge, and they keep going. And maybe it was inevitable given the situation in Europe 100 years ago, but it's not inevitable today. And we can change course at any time. And the thing is, it takes will. It takes people showing up. You got to be there. Even today. Hang on a second. Hang on one second. Let me just finish this, and I'll turn it over to you. The thing is that even now, even after 4 years of Trump, even in the situation that we face now, even when every time you turn around, Americans look at this and say, my God, how the hell do these horrible people wind up in charge? Only 40% of Americans show up to vote.
All right.
If you don't want to wind up in Nazi Germany, you're going to have to take action. And right now, that action is the simple duty of being a citizen. If you don't do that part, eventually you're going to have to take up arms. And I'm going to tell you, as somebody who spent most of my life involved in war, that's a hell of a lot harder and a hell of a lot more terrible. And you have the opportunity to change course now, but you got to do it. Go ahead.
All right. Well, the same Trump got into office the same way Hitler got into office, is the people behind him, the people who financed him, said, once he's in office, we can control him. That was the thinking of the right-wing millionaires who funded Hitler. Said, they couldn't. And Trump, the same people, the Republican Party was saying, oh yeah, once he's in office, we'll control him, we'll get what we want. No, you cannot control an insane person. There are people, you got to learn real fast. You can't control them. You walk away. You withdraw your support, and they didn't.
Well, you're exactly correct. You're 100% correct. And the thing about what people didn't see, and this is the analogy here between what happened with Hitler and what happened with Trump is very similar in the fact that both were elected by the mob. And what that means is that when populism elects the leader, right, you got dogs and blenders and all kinds of stuff. But when populism elects a leader, then it's populism that has the power, not the party, not the people. And so if you think that you're going to elect somebody like Trump and that he's going to be controlled by the reasonable, rational people and whatever sane members of that party are left, you're wrong, because there's something going on over there, man. I think we're mostly out of time here, but I think we're going to turn it over to whatever horrible disasters happened in Gerrold house.
So I see Charlie held up my hand while I was answering the door.
Yeah, Charlie's
all right, listen,
over, man.
We are.
We're going to have to get.
We have done our hour.
Yeah.
We have done our hour, and Mike's here to fix my desktop. So
right.
Let me say, Jim, it was great seeing you. I hope everything is working out for you. Have a safe trip. I'm sorry to hear about your mom, but I hope she's recovering.
Yeah, she's watching. Well. She should be watching. Hi, Mom. And
okay,
so
hi, Mom.
Watching and so we're gonna get rolling here, and I think Charlie sounded the alarm, and it's probably time to punch out. So.
All right, I will see you next month.
Okay.
I'll let you know about the GoFundMe as soon as I have it organized.
Thanks a lot, David. We'll get that up tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll shut you guys down in just a second after our brief ad. For next week, we have the one and only Pat Rice going to come show up, and she's going to explain to us why I have to send 1099s to my writers and other elements of the tax code that plague the writers. Oh, say hello to the dog.
There he is. There's Charlie right there.
What's her name?
Charlie. That's Charlie. Charlie. I think David's taking his headphones off, but that's Charlie is who that
Oh,
is.
Dave can't hear us anymore. Okay.
There he is. He's back.
Well, he's wanting you to introduce your dog to those who haven't met him.
Oh, you're muted. I did. Yeah, you're still muted, David. You got your mic off.
All right, this is Charlie, and he's a spoiled little pig, but and he's 7 years old. And he's 7 years old, and so he thinks he's a watchdog.
That's right. All right. Well, we're gonna have to punch
Okay.
out here. So
Yeah,
I'm
I know.
unplugged,
Yeah,
Bob.
Dave's got people coming, and Jim's got to go find facilities. And I just want to thank all of y'all for being here. Come back next week as well. We talk a little bit about taxes. And
All right.
let me punch the button.
All right.
All right,
Punch
good
it
night.
out.